Hey guys, welcome back. My name's Billy Roberts. I'm a concept artist and illustrator. In today's video, we'll be designing this mech character. We use the hard round, the soft round, and a square brush to achieve these results. Today's video will be about process and just some little tips and tricks along the way to help you guys go through these processes also. So at the beginning, I'm using that square brush and I'm throwing down some silhouette shapes for iterative design, primarily focusing on intrigue, just something that interests me. I knew I was going to do a mech character, some type of either cyborg or mechanical design of some sort. And I decided to pull the guy from the right. I thought that guy was really cool. He had a really nice gesture, posture, just everything about the form and the design. I sort of seen something in there. And we go straight into a line pass. This is where I extract as much of the design as I possibly can from the forms that I had underneath. And it sort of gives me a head start on starting to understand what the character is, what the design language is. So I do like this process for that. It's much harder to start with a blank page and not to have any sort of under gesture or silhouette. So the big lesson there is, if you're struggling to draw something, start with a silhouette. Start with a form underneath to help you get an idea going. Of course, use reference as well. Find some mechanical things online, whether it's like diggers or earth moving equipment, if you are going to try some type of mechanical design, and use that to your advantage as a reference of design. So this line pass is actually a draft pass. It's just enough to get the idea through. And now I'm going into a more refined silhouette and cleaning up around the edges of my line pass and filling that silhouette back in. So now we've got a relatively clean silhouette to work from for the painting process. So in this next phase, I now drop the opacity. I fill the silhouette with a local color. It's more or less the highlight or mid-tone. And I come back through with a hard round brush, just the default hard round. And really what I'm trying to achieve here is a cleaner version, and I'm really focusing on a few areas to make a few areas really clean and clear, and that is cylinders and on the arms there. Really why I think that's important to spend some time to get those angles relatively correct is because the eyes from the viewer will use those as points of reference, because they can be easily made points of reference to determine whether or not what they're seeing is in perspective or not in perspective. So those things are really important to get right, only in a few areas. And if we can get it right in a few areas, it will sell the idea of perspective being present and accurate. So really, we just need to do it for a few spots, some really, clear, precise thinking around the angles and the geometry. And it should sell that we have a really clear and decisive perspective for the design. So don't rush things like cylinders and rounded objects like that, because it will be quite jarring if it's incorrect. So you'll see me trying to force that idea into almost every part that I think is important in the design, where I spend the time to define the shape properly and not go too fast, not move too fast. In this type of process, there is no awards for making a bad line art pass. So while I'm going through this line art pass, I'm also throwing in some secondary and tertiary design elements, basically to help me define all of the aspects of the language. And I'm also throwing in all of my accent shadows, all of my deep shadows where the light would never get to, and I'm trying to put them in now where I see fit. And that really helps to create some depth in the line art pass. So this process is pretty standard. There's a lot of ways of working these days. I personally find that this particular way of working is absolutely fantastic for design iteration and design presentation. Depending on what you're working in or for, this would be subjected to, let's say, games. And in some cases, the game will be a little more high fidelity, therefore this process would be somewhat void just based on the fidelity. But it's a great way to communicate design and clarity in the design and clearly show that your thoughts have been solidified and you have defined almost every idea that you've come up with clearly and not muddy. So that's why we do go into such great effort with the line pass to define each form, each shape, and each piece of detail, hopefully to sell that to the viewer on that first impression. Alright, so that line pass is pretty much complete. We now have to go back through the silhouette one more time and just fill in and erase the parts that we've either added or subtracted from that silhouette. And now we get into a design part where we have a silhouette and we have a design in the language. Now we need to actually decide on how we're going to break up the design. So I went with a two-tone mindset where we have one color and a secondary color. So the primary color being this tanned off-white, that's my rest. And the secondary color is going to be my mechanical parts. So I'm sort of aiming for an 80-20 rule with this. I may have gone accidentally more like 70-30 in the end result, but it still is strong enough of a breakup to have some level of intrigue as an end result. You'll see me there now going in to the main silhouette tone, this off-white, and I'm adding in a shadow color. I then select out the darker tones, and I just use a soft round brush to add a shadow at the bottom edge of all of that metallic, mechanical design areas. I then go back through and I'm just adding a few accent colors like these yellows and trying to add a little bit of intrigue to drive the eyes forward into the piece to look at specific areas, and the eyes not to wander around too much and get bored of what they're looking at. So we've added some yellow accents on the shoulders and on the head to drive the eyes to those areas of interest. And we've started to paint in some more stronger ambient shadows and some accent shadows. I then start to use my layers to my advantage. I used a multiply layer and basically painted that in from the ground up. And now I can go back in and start to actually erase the parts that are going to receive light. You'll see me adding back in around just our edges that aren't facing directly up, just a few more shadows, and then working back and forth between erasing and adding shadow. At this point here, we could consider this completely done as a design. There is nothing missing, everything's there, it's very clear, it's very readable as an idea. But we keep going because I wanted to push this a little further, and essentially you could work this until you remove almost all of the line. Here was another decision where I added a third color, but it's essentially the secondary color, but just a little bit more gray. And I was just trying to really separate the gun from the abdomen section of the design. I found that it was sort of bleeding into itself, and ideally we could have just made the gun a different color, but I wanted to keep everything pretty harmonious in the color palette. So still just working through it, pretty much just adding a bunch of details where I see fit, fixing up any shadows that I may have missed, and defining some forms a little better. So you see, even with the shadows off there, we don't actually need the shadows present for the design to read. And I think that's the point of this process, this hard, round brush, super unforgiving, and not much pen pressure either. It just says when you put a line down, it's like using a ballpoint pen. So there is no BS with that. It's just you either are forced to think about what you're doing with each stroke, with each line. And I think it really helps to break habits with scratchiness of line quality. So I think that the big takeaway for this whole thing would be that to try this process, to allow yourself to have a stronger line quality in your work, And with that being said, guys, there's the finished result. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you've got any comments, please leave a comment. And with that being said, thank you very much for watching. Be sure to subscribe. It helps me out a bunch. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.